quiet night at the brownstone shatters when Archie walks into blood, secrets, and a threat aimed straight at Wolfe. Settle in, this mystery twists deeper with every step. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? And subscribe so you never miss upcoming mysteries. Nero Wolfe and the day Wolfe got stabbed. I've returned home late from plenty of errands, but walking into the brownstone at 11:17 that night felt like stepping into a punchline without the joke. The front hall was still, the kind of stillness that usually meant Wolfe had retreated to his books or was conserving breath for a lecture. I hung up my hat, brushed the drizzle off my sleeves, and headed for the office with the leisurely stride of a man who expected peace and got none. The door was ajar, and the moment I nudged it with my fingertips, the quiet snapped like thin ice. Blood never looks friendly in lamplight. It glared at me from the floorboards in a slick trail leading toward Wolfe's desk, bright and wet enough to strike me sober. I didn't need a lab crew or a magnifier to know it was fresh. My stomach performed a small but efficient twist that no amount of training can cure. Wolfe sat behind the desk, a mountain pretending it had not been shaken. His face was paler than usual, and he was holding a hand against his left side like he'd misplaced a sandwich and found a knife instead. "You can cease braying," he muttered before I could open my mouth. "I am not dying. It is a graze." "A graze," I repeated. "Fine, let's call it that. And the blood decorating your parquet floor is what? A polite suggestion?" "Archie." His tone had the finality of a slamming vault. "Compose yourself." If I'd been any more composed, I would have been embalmed. I moved in fast and crouched beside the desk, ignoring the sting in my knees. "Stab wound?" "Yes," Wolfe admitted, eyes narrowed with irritation as much as pain. "During your absence. The assailant came from behind, struck and fled." "You didn't ring." I tugged his hand aside to inspect the cut. It was shallow but deliberate, a slice meant to silence a man who preferred to talk last. "You didn't call the police, yell, bellow, or even grunt." "I rang the bell," Wolfe snapped, pointing toward the cord, "but whoever entered had already gone. The door downstairs opened and closed. I was not about to stagger after him like a fool." Fritz appeared in the doorway, pale and stiff. The man once carried a pot of bouillabaisse through a kitchen fire without blinking, but seeing Wolfe wounded robbed him of half his confidence. He glanced at me, then at the floor. "Mr. Goodwin, should I—" "No," Wolfe said sharply. "Return to your kitchen, Fritz. I require no fuss." Fritz hesitated, bowed slightly, and retreated with the gravity of a man leaving a battlefield. That left the three of us, Wolfe, me, and the smell of blood that didn't belong in his office. "Theodore?" I asked. "In the plant rooms." He heard nothing. Wolfe inhaled tightly. "Lock the house." I rose, crossed the office, and locked the front door, back door, and the side door to the garden with the speed of a bellhop chasing tips. When I returned, Wolfe hadn't moved, but his breathing had smoothed somewhat. "Let me clean it," I said. "You will not dab at me like a nursemaid." "Fine," I replied. "Then I'll dab like a barbarian. Lift your arm." He did, with enough reluctance to fuel a Broadway tragedy. I cleaned the wound, applied pressure, and taped it shut, all while keeping a running commentary for my own sanity. "You know," I said, "I could install a moat, maybe some crocodiles for ambiance." "Phooey." That's practically encouragement. The wound wasn't life-threatening, but the intent behind it was. Wolfe was not a man who collected enemies casually. Those he did collect tended to avoid stabbing him in the dark unless they wanted to be prosecuted with prose. "What did the intruder look like?" I asked. "I did not see him. It was dark. The lamp had been extinguished." "Extinguished by you or him?" "Him." Wolfe shifted in his chair, grimacing as if the upholstery had offended him. A hand struck from the side. I turned, but he had already retreated. "And you're sure it wasn't a client dropping off a late retainer and some unsolicited homicide?" "Archie." Wolfe pointed at the small scrap on his desk. "The only clue." I picked it up. A torn piece of expensive blue stationery, the kind high-end clubs issue to members who prefer their correspondence scented with privilege. Embossed into the corner, half ripped away, were the unmistakable words, "Northbridge Club." "Well, well," I murmured. "That's not your usual dinner guest." "It was in his hand," Wolfe said. "He dropped it while striking." "Meaning our mysterious intruder wanted us to know where he's from." I turned the scrap over. "Or he panicked and tore it off something he was carrying." Wolfe leaned back, the motion small but steady. The Northbridge Club is not a place for footpads. You think someone there wants to turn you into a human pincushion? If they wished me dead, they would not use a blade so small. Wolfe closed his eyes briefly. No, this was meant as a warning, or a test. Well, if this was a test, you passed by bleeding the least. It is superficial, he growled. Do not aggrandize it. Sure, just life-threateningly superficial. I tucked the scrap of stationery into an envelope. Evidence stays evidence, and I never pocket the original. You're lucky he didn't put the whole knife in. He missed. Wolfe opened his eyes again, and there it was, a flicker beneath the irritation. Vulnerability. Not fear, not quite, but the knowledge that someone had breached his sanctuary and aimed to cut more than his skin. He will not succeed a second time. That's the spirit, I said lightly. Nothing like a bit of attempted murder to spice up a Thursday. He glared. Do not notify the police yet. Yet? Until I am fully informed, Wolfe said. I prefer not to indulge Inspector Kramer's flair for occupation. Kramer's flair for occupation keeps killers in cages, I pointed out. Also, he gets twitchy when you withhold stabbing incidents. Archie. Yes, sir. Silence. I gave him silence for 5 seconds, which was a personal best. The office was dim, the lamplight flickering off the edges of the bookcases. Outside, traffic purred along 35th Street, oblivious to the fact that someone had tried to shorten my employer. I stepped to the window, moved the curtain a hair and checked the street. Nothing unusual. Just Manhattan being Manhattan, loud, indifferent and smug. He got out fast, I said, which means he knew the layout. Obviously. And he knew you'd be in the office, as I am every evening. And he didn't go for me, I added. He waited until I left. Wolfe's frown deepened. Yes. Meaning he was either watching the house or knew my schedule. You have no schedule, Wolfe replied irritably. You are erratic. Thank you, but the point stands. Wolfe drummed thick fingers on the chair arm, a habit he resorted to only when thinking at high velocity. Someone sought to test my defences. It was clumsy, but deliberate. I nodded. A red herring. Maybe they wanted us to think the Northbridge Club is involved. Or, Wolfe said, opening his eyes fully, it is involved. I took a breath, then a step toward the desk. Look, if you want, we can bring in Saul tonight, or Ori, or Fred, or the entire alphabet. No, Wolfe's voice tightened. First, I must think. Fine. You think. I'll pace. I paced 3 strides and back. Whoever it was, they planned this. Nobody breaks into the brownstone casually, except maybe a suicidal encyclopedia salesman. Sit, Wolfe ordered. I'm too keyed up. Then stand and stop gibbering. That was his way of saying he appreciated my concern. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. We've played this duet too long. After a moment, Wolfe inhaled, winced faintly, and fixed me with a steady gaze. Archie. Sir? Someone has struck at me in my own house. His voice was low, cold, and clear as gin. We shall strike back. By the time the sky finally began to lighten, Wolfe was still in the office, bandaged, furious, and refusing to leave his chair. At 9:46 a.m., sunlight crept into the room and caught him squarely on the slipper, earning it a scowl usually reserved for Inspector Kramer. Normally, by that hour, he'd be in the plant rooms tormenting orchids with philosophy, not sitting at his desk with a bandage taped under his shirt and a scowl that could curdle concrete. But that morning wasn't the type to ask permission. Neither was the woman who arrived with it. I was at my typewriter trying to decide whether last night's attempted murder deserved a new folder tab when the doorbell rang with the crisp, confident chime of someone who knew the bell wouldn't dare malfunction for her. Fritz appeared a few seconds later in the office doorway, not entering, merely appearing, because Fritz respects boundaries like they're fine crystal. A lady, Mr. Goodwin, he said. She did not give her name. Details? I asked. She has the bearing, Fritz said delicately, of importance. Wolfe grunted. Bring her. Fritz stepped aside, and she entered. If self-possession were a weapon, she would have been armed to the teeth. Madeline Northbridge moved like a woman accustomed to audiences standing when she walked in. She was tall, immaculate, and draped in a coat the colour of fog over Manhattan Bay, expensive fog that didn't mix with common humidity. The hat was small and tasteful. The gloves were dove-grey kid leather. Everything about her said money with a memory. "Mr. Wolfe," she said, offering a nod that wasn't quite a bow and wasn't quite not. "Mr. Goodwin." Her voice had the calm weight of a gavel wrapped in velvet. I stood, because I'm polite, and also because she scared the starch out of the chair. "Good morning. You'll want this one," I said, gesturing to the red chair. "I will stand," she said, and did. Wolfe glared like she'd insulted his furniture. "Madam," he said, "state your business." She didn't blink. "You were attacked last night." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Mine widened. "Word travels fast," I said. She ignored me. "The attack was no accident." Wolfe's voice sharpened. "I was not investigating anything concerning you." "Not consciously," she said, "but someone believes you were, and that is why you were attacked." Wolfe made a sound halfway between a snort and a growl. "Confound it, madam, stop speaking elliptically." He jabbed a finger toward the chair. "Sit. If you insist on vexing me, do it from a suitable distance, not like a governess disciplining a schoolboy." She sat. I admit, I admired her nerves. Most people needed a pickaxe to dig up the courage to sit under Wolfe's stare. She crossed her legs with precise elegance, folded her gloves in her lap, and regarded Wolfe with the composure of a duchess fielding an incompetent parliament. "My name," she said, "is Madeline Northbridge. My husband, Henry Northbridge, founded the Northbridge Club. He died 6 months ago, officially by heart failure." "Officially," Wolfe said flatly. She nodded once. "I now believe he was murdered." Well, that was one way to start a morning. Wolfe didn't bat an eye. "Why?" "Because," she said, "members of the club have been receiving anonymous threats for weeks, and yesterday I received one myself." She reached into her handbag, slowly, politely, like she had practiced doing it without alarming policemen, and produced a folded card. I took it, because Wolfe wasn't going to lean forward for anything less than a truffle soufflé. The message was simple, typed on the same expensive blue Northbridge stationery I'd retrieved from our office floor last night. "We know what you know. Stop digging." "Red herring?" I suggested. "Misdirection," she agreed. "A coward's attempt at intimidation." Wolfe pointed at the card. "And you believe this is connected to your husband's death?" "I do. Henry was investigating something at the club, a financial matter. I don't know precisely what, but he met secretly with 2 members during his last month alive, Congressman Harland Rusk and Mr. Victor Armitage, a broker of notable ambition." "The kind of ambition that shows teeth?" I asked. Her eyes flicked toward me. "The kind that corrodes." Wolfe sighed, a deep, annoyed abdominal sound. "Madam, you said someone believed I was investigating your husband." "Yes," she said. "Someone at the club believes you learned something after Henry died, or that Henry confided in you." "He did not," Wolfe barked. "I'm aware," she said calmly, "but they may not be." Wolfe's scowl deepened until it cast its own shadow. "You are presuming conclusions without evidence." "I have evidence," she said, reaching into her bag again. This time she produced a check. She placed it on Wolfe's desk with the delicacy of placing a crown jewel on velvet. Wolfe did not touch it, but I did, because I have no shame where paperwork is concerned. $50,000. $50,000. That kind of money could persuade Wolfe to tolerate a hurricane in his study. "You assume," Wolfe said slowly, "that I will accept payment to pursue an investigation I was not conducting and had no intention of conducting." "I assume," she said, "that someone tried to kill you because they thought you were already involved, and you may prefer not to be murdered." "Madam," Wolfe slapped the desk lightly with his palm, "you presume entirely too much." She didn't flinch. "I presume survival matters to you." Wolfe's nostrils flared, a warning sign. I've seen bulls in parades with more restraint. "Madam," he said, "I will expel you from my house unless you cease dangling insinuations like ornaments. Speak plainly." She inhaled once, sharply, then she did speak plainly. "My husband found proof of fraud," she said. "Large-scale, systematic theft of club funds. He kept it quiet until he could confront the guilty party. Before he could, he died. I believe he was silenced." "And the suspects?" "As I said, Congressman Rusk and Victor Armitage." Wolfe shifted his weight, wincing as the bandage tugged. Her eyes caught it, her lips compressed. She looked at the bandage, then at the check, and made her case with the calm certainty of an heiress accustomed to having the world obey. "Finish the investigation he began," she said. Wolfe leaned back. "You say finish, madam. I have not begun." "But your attacker thought you had." She glanced at me. "Mr. Goodwin, you understand the logic." "Sometimes," I said, "when it isn't wearing gloves." The phone rang before Wolfe could retort. I crossed the room and answered. "Nero Wolfe's residence. Goodwin speaking." Kramer's voice came through like a gravel truck shifting gears. "Goodwin, put Wolfe on." "He's busy." "Stop being cute." A complaint came across my desk claiming Wolfe is meddling at the Northbridge Club, that he's been sticking his nose into their affairs for weeks. I want the truth. "Hold it," I said. "I'll hand you to the nose in question." Wolfe accepted the phone with a sigh heavy enough to bend metal. "Inspector." Kramer's voice was audible from several feet away, gruff, clipped, irritated but not furious. "Wolfe, I'm getting calls from a club secretary claiming you're prying into their books. Are you?" "No," Wolfe said. "I also hear you had blood in your office last night." "That," Wolfe said sharply, "is none of your affair until I say otherwise." "If someone tried to kill you," Kramer growled, "it damn well is my affair. Report it or I'll—" Wolfe hung up. Madeline Northbridge didn't blink. "He will not take that gracefully," she murmured. "Inspector Kramer," I said, "is the proud owner of 3 facial expressions: irritated, more irritated, and contemplating retirement. That was the first." Wolfe glared at me. "Archie." "Yes, sir." "Desist." Madeline straightened in her chair. Her gloves rested perfectly aligned on her knee. "Mr. Wolfe, I am not a woman who indulges paranoia, but I am also not a woman who ignores pattern. My husband died under suspicious circumstances. Members of the club, including myself, are being threatened. And last night, you were attacked. All lines converge." Wolfe closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them, their glint was no longer irritation. It was calculation. "Madam," he said, "if you expect me to conduct an inquiry, I will require complete candor, no evasions." "You shall have it." "And if you mislead me again," Wolfe said, voice low and final, "I withdraw." She inclined her head, accepting the terms with the dignity of royalty signing a treaty. Then she rose. "Mr. Wolfe," she said softly, "I appreciate your courage more than you know." Wolfe stiffened at the word courage. I stepped between them before he could demand clarification. "I'll see you to the door," I said. She nodded and walked out, leaving behind a faint trace of jasmine and war. When I returned to the office, Wolfe was staring at the check. "Well," I said. He didn't look up. "Archie, deposit it." "That means we're on the case," he sighed. "If I am to be stabbed, I insist on being compensated." I grinned. And coming from him, that was a tender lullaby. If there's one thing New York does better than noise, it's pretending not to hear anything at all. The following morning at 10:03, the Northbridge Club sat on East 57th Street like a marble sphinx holding its breath, daring the world to guess what was inside. I'd seen plenty of institutions designed to keep the riffraff out, but this one went the extra mile. It gave the riffraff the impression they were riffraff simply by letting them look at the door. I climbed the steps, flashed Madeline Northbridge's introductory card, and entered a lobby upholstered in more money than I'll ever earn in a lifetime of honest typing. A man the size of a well-funded monument took my coat and didn't ask my name. He didn't need to. His expression said he could identify my income bracket by scent. The coat check room smelled faintly of cedar and class division. Even the hangers looked like they had trust funds. I made a mental note. If Wolfe ever came here, the carpets would sue him for trespass. I moved deeper into the club, through walnut-panelled corridors lined with oil portraits that probably billed the members for the privilege of being stared at. Thick carpets swallowed every step, and cigar haze drifted lazily near the ceiling like expensive fog. It was the kind of place where the secrets were older than the furniture and far better dressed. A few heads turned as I entered the main lounge, men in tailored suits, their expressions a cocktail of curiosity, irritation, and the shared hope that I wasn't here to audit them. I gave them my friendliest grin, the one that says, "I'm harmless until I'm not." The first familiar face was Victor Armitage. Broker, hotshot, and sweat machine. He was leaning against the bar, clutching a glass of club soda like it was a flotation device in shark-infested waters. His suit was immaculate, but his collar was damp. "Morning," I said. He jumped like I'd jabbed him with a cattle prod. "Goodwin, I didn't expect—" "Few people ever do." I scanned the room. "Nice place. Does it come with a map, or do members navigate by scent?" He swallowed. "I don't know what you're doing here." "That makes two of us, but I'm open to clues. You got any?" He turned away, pretending to study his reflection in the mirror behind the bar. The mirror, out of sheer politeness, pretended not to notice him. "I'm busy," he muttered. "Sure, sweating is hard work." I patted his shoulder and left him to hydrate. Across the room, Congressman Harland Rusk held court near the windows. Rusk was the kind of politician who smiled like a serpent in a silk tie. His charm was a veneer you could skate on, but I wouldn't recommend it unless you enjoyed drowning below the ice. He saw me approaching and arranged his face into a genial expression that almost fooled me. Almost. "Mr. Goodwin," he said warmly. "What a surprise. We don't get many investigators here." "Relax," I said. I left my lie detector in my other suit. "Ha." His laugh was smooth as cream and just as greasy. "What brings Nero Wolfe's right hand to our humble den?" "Curiosity," I said. "The dangerous kind." He lifted his chin a fraction. "I hope you're not implying the club is involved in any unpleasantness." "Implication is such a strong word," I said. "Let's call it a conversation starter." Rusk's smile sharpened. "You might find some conversations here less welcome than others." "Oh, I've found that everywhere. But thanks for the warning." He leaned closer. "Forgive my directness, Mr. Goodwin, but I'd advise you to tread lightly. People here value their privacy." "People everywhere value their privacy," I said, "but only in clubs like this do they expect it to be bulletproof." His smile held, but the eyes cooled. "Enjoy your visit." "Sure thing, Congressman." I moved on before the frostbite reached my sleeves. The secretary, Raymond Holdren, found me before I found him. He materialized from a side hall like a startled rabbit in a tailored vest. He had thin hair, thin lips, and the expression of a man constantly bracing for bad news. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, wringing his hands, "you're not authorized to question members without, well, authorization." "That's so?" I asked. "Yes." His voice shook like it was late for an appointment. "The club has procedures." "Congratulations," I said. "Every organization needs a hobby. Tell me, Huldren, what's behind the locked library door?" His face twitched. "Renovations." "Ah, renovations that require the door to be bashed in?" His eyes widened in genuine alarm. "What? Who told you?" A carpenter walking past muttered without stopping. "Door was smashed last night. Told the secretary already." Then he vanished before Huldren could strangle him with his tie. Well," Huldren stammered. There was a misunderstanding. Between the door and a battering ram." "It's under control," he insisted. "The club prefers not to publicize maintenance issues." "Maintenance," I repeated. "Sure. Blood on the doorknob counts as maintenance." He froze. "Blood?" "Tiny smear. Inside handle. Not Wolfe's unless he's been moonlighting." I let the silence sink into him like a cold bath. "Anybody hurt around here last night?" "No," he whispered. "Try again." He swallowed. I need to find the club president. Excuse me." He bolted down the hall like a fox aware the hounds had personalized stationery. I made a circuit of the halls, taking mental snapshots of the layout: billiard room, cigar lounge, private dining rooms, a ballroom big enough to stow a dirigible, and the infamous locked library door itself. It sat at the end of a secondary corridor, flanked by 2 brass lamps and a floral carpet that looked expensive and smelled smug. The door frame bore fresh splinter marks. Someone had hit it hard enough to shave off wood. I leaned in. The blood smear was faint, almost invisible, but it was there, a thin, rusty crescent near the latch. I didn't touch it. I don't touch original evidence unless I want Kramer to show up breathing fire. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I stepped into a quiet niche and answered. "It's Cohen," Lon said. "Tell me you didn't get thrown out yet." "Not yet. Give me an hour." "You're calling from inside the walls of privilege?" he asked. "I hope they disinfect you on the way out." "You can write my obituary later," I said. "For now. Dig up anything on Congressman Rusk and Victor Armitage. Charity fund scandals, campaign donations, shady accounting, anything that smells like a politician's handshake. Copy that. He paused, lowering his voice. You rattled someone. 2 members called the Gazette already, asking if Wolfe is launching an investigation. Tell them we're just here for the salmon mousse. Cohen snorted. Stay alive. No guarantees. I hung up, straightened my tie, and headed back to the main hall. Rusk was gone. Armitage was still sweating. Haldren was missing entirely. Club staff kept glancing toward the library door as if it were breathing smoke. Something bad had happened in that room. My stomach tightened. Someone had forced entry, left blood behind, and maybe walked straight from here to Wolfe's office last night. If that wasn't a straight line between 2 dots, I'd forgotten my schooling. At 11:32, I left the club and headed back to the brownstone. Manhattan traffic tried its best to rearrange my anatomy on the way, but I made it in one piece. Wolfe was in the office, not in the plant rooms, which told me more than any confession. He looked up as I entered. Well, he demanded. It's a cozy nest of secrets, I said. If the drapery were any thicker, it'd smother the truth out of habit. Details, Archie. I gave him the full report. Rusk's charm offensive, Armitage's perspiration problem, Haldren's evasiveness, the carpenter's whisper, the smashed door, the blood smear. Wolfe steepled his fingers. Describe the smear. Left side of the inside knob, I said. Small, smudged, probably wiped in a hurry. He closed his eyes. If someone fled my office wounded, he would have sought immediate refuge. That room provided privacy. You think it's the same guy? Yes. Wolfe inhaled deeply through the nose. The assailant was at the club the same night. And that room hides the motive. He opened his eyes, sharp as broken glass. Precisely. A silence settled. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that means the game has begun. I leaned on the desk. What's our next move? Wolfe's gaze darkened. We pry open that room's secret, Archie, with delicacy or force. Shall I sharpen a battering ram? Phooey, bring your brain. He reached for the bell cord, signaling Fritz for lunch. As routine reclaimed the office, the menace of the club's shadows still clung to the air. The motives were locked in that room, and soon Wolfe would unlock them. The morning after that, when the bell rang at 9:18, it had the tone of a man with bad news and worse timing. I was in the office typing up notes from my visit to the Northbridge Club when Fritz appeared in the doorway, his posture stiffer than uncooked linguine. Inspector Kramer, he announced. Wolfe looked up from his desk with the expression of someone informed that a sewer pipe had burst beneath his chair. Bring him, he said. Kramer walked in with a slow, heavy tread, not storming, not barking, just carrying the weight of something grim behind his eyes. His cigar was unlit between his fingers, a sure sign the morning had taken a turn for the bleak. He didn't bother with greetings. Wolfe, he said. Goodwin. Inspector, Wolfe replied coolly. I nodded. Morning. You look like you slept under a printing press. Save the jokes, Kramer said. We've got a body, and you, both of you, are tied to it whether you like it or not. That, Wolfe murmured, is improbable. It's accurate. Kramer finally lit his cigar, like ceremony had finally caught up with necessity. Raymond Haldren, your secretary friend from the club, Goodwin. I straightened. Haldren? Dead? Locked inside the library you were sniffing around yesterday, Kramer said. And before you start improvising fairy tales, no, we don't know who put him there, how he got in, or why the door was smashed last night and resecured afterward. But he's dead. The room chilled a degree. Wolfe sat back. Explain. Kramer exhaled smoke. The club janitor unlocked the library this morning to start repairs. Found Haldren on the floor between 2 bookcases. No signs of robbery. No signs of struggle except the wound. Stabbed once, expertly. My stomach tightened. Same blade type as Wolfe's wound. Kramer flicked ash into the tray I slid over for him. So it seems. The ME says the angle's similar. Blade about 5 inches. Thin, sharp. Killer wiped the handle but missed something. Something? Wolfe prompted. Kramer looked at me. Goodwin, you're going to love this. He reached into his pocket and produced a small glassine envelope. Inside was a sliver of light blue paper. We found this under Haldren's collar, he said. Northbridge Club stationery. Same paper you showed us yesterday. I didn't touch it. I leaned in close and nodded. It's a match. Wolfe frowned. The killer's hand brushed Haldren's collar while retrieving the blade. Or while planting something, I said. Kramer grunted. Don't get clever. There's enough clever in this case to drown us all. He turned back to Wolfe. And before you deny everything, you're tied in because the same knife type was used on you last night. Wolfe's mouth compressed into a thin line. Inspector, I have never denied I was attacked. I merely chose to report it when it suited the investigation. That's not how the law works, Wolfe. That is precisely how it works in this house, Wolfe replied. They stared at each other like two chess masters contemplating the same doomed pawn. For once neither raised his voice. After a moment, Wolfe gestured irritably. Archie, details. I gave him the rundown, the locked library, Haldren's evasiveness, the carpenter's tip about the door being smashed the night before, the blood smear, Armitage's flop sweat, Rusk's polished snake routine. Kramer listened with the stoicism of a man absorbing a weather report about an incoming hurricane. When I finished, he exhaled smoke in a taut stream. Damn it, he muttered. This whole place is rotten. If the club is rotten, I said, Haldren knew something he shouldn't. Or someone thought he knew, Kramer added. Wolfe drummed his fingers lightly on the armrest. Inspector, you said the door was resecured. Locked from the outside, Kramer confirmed. Someone forced entry last night, killed Haldren, left through another exit, then someone else locked the door afterward, or, he raised a brow. The killer returned to lock it. Someone with keys, I said. Most likely, Kramer said. Wolfe shifted his bulk uncomfortably, a reminder that he was still wounded. Archie, he said. The assailant fled here last night, wounded. You reported that the blood at the club differed in shade from mine. Yes, I said. Darker, thicker. Whoever left it in the library door wasn't you. Kramer's eyes narrowed. Goodwin, are you suggesting your intruder last night was the murderer this morning? I'm suggesting he didn't stop at stabbing Wolfe, I said, and he might have been hiding at the club immediately after. Kramer groaned softly. I hate when you're right. Wolfe interjected. Inspector, do not overinflate Mr. Goodwin. It encourages him. Encouragement is healthy, I said. For livestock, Wolfe replied. I smirked. Kramer pretended not to notice. Do you have suspects? Wolfe asked. Half the club, Kramer said, but the board is blocking us. They're using lawyers like umbrellas in the rain. Phooey, Wolfe said. Tell me about it, Kramer muttered. He leaned on Wolfe's desk, cigar gripped between thick fingers. His weariness was starting to show, dark circles, irritability, the kind of slumped posture you see in men who've been interrogating suspects since the Hoover administration. Wolfe, he said quietly, for once in your life, work with me. Wolfe didn't bristle, he simply nodded. Facts only. Fine. Fact 1. Haldren's murder ties directly to your stabbing. Same blade family, same type of wound. Fact 2. The torn paper suggests a link to the threats floating around that fancy club. Fact 3. Someone is moving fast. If we don't catch him now, we'll be fishing bodies out of Fifth Avenue fountains. Wolfe squinted. You exaggerate. Not by much. The air grew thick. The brownstone felt suddenly smaller, as if the walls had leaned in to listen. I broke the tension. Wolfe, considering the last 24 hours, we should get you a suit of armor. Confound you, Wolfe muttered. It would suit your personality, I said. Kramer actually snorted. Goodwin, save the snappy lines for the Gazette, I shrugged. They don't pay as well. Wolfe cut through the chatter. Enough. We must act. He turned to me. Archie, call Saul. Saul Panzer, the best man in Manhattan at tracing a shadow. I nodded and reached for the phone. And Ori, Wolfe added. He will observe the domestic staff at the club. Ori loves observing, I said. It makes him feel tall. Kramer smirked at that. And Durkin? Yes, Wolfe said. He manages the back entrance traffic. 3 operatives. Wolfe wasn't playing anymore. As I dialed, Kramer continued to smoke with the desperation of a man who wanted sleep, but would settle for nicotine. When I finished setting Saul in motion, Wolfe spoke again. Inspector, he said, the killer is bold. He will strike again if not contained. Kramer nodded grimly. We're trying. You must try harder. Kramer scowled. If you have a suggestion. Not yet, Wolfe said sharply. Kramer's jaw worked. Then I'll keep doing my job. You keep doing yours. He stood, exhaled smoke and paused at the office door. "Wolfe? Goodwin. Call me if anything breaks." That was Kramer's version of a handshake. He left without slamming the door. Wolfe sighed heavily and rubbed his side. "Archie." "Yes, sir?" "Do not distract me with foolish remarks about armor." "I thought humor was medicinal." "It is not," Wolfe growled. "Then I'll try sarcasm next time." He ignored me and closed his eyes. That meant thought. Dangerous thought. I sat at my desk, typing up the fresh details for our files, one neat page per clue, the way Wolfe preferred to consume information. The air held the smell of smoke, orchids drifting down from the plant rooms above, and the faint metallic tang of danger lingering from last night. At 10:27 the phone rang. I picked up. "Goodwin," I said. "Archie, it's Lon." His voice was tight. "Brace yourself." "For what?" "You're in the morning paper." I groaned. "What now?" The headline reads, "Famed detective stabbed in own office, connection to elite club." That's above the fold, big type. I closed my eyes. Wolfe is going to explode. "Explode and then sue," Lon said. "Brace him." I hung up and turned to Wolfe. He already knew. His eyes were open, cold, furious, and unblinking. The pressure had gone public, and that meant trouble was no longer knocking discreetly. It was moving in. The Northbridge Club had always struck me as the kind of place where even the chandeliers had social memberships. But that evening, with the charity gala in full swing, it looked ready to ascend into the aristocracy's private heaven. At 8:14 p.m., the lobby shimmered with enough satin, jewels, and tuxedoed egos to bankroll a medium-sized war. If you ever want to see rich people panic, put them in formal wear and tell them a murder might smear their reputation. They'll smile hard enough to crack enamel. Wolfe, naturally, was planted in the brownstone where he belonged. But after the morning's revelation that Huldron had been stabbed dead, and the newspaper headline turning Wolfe into front-page target practice, he decided someone had to infiltrate the silk and smoke circus. And that someone was me. Archie Goodwin, wolf among the sheep, or sheep among the wolves, depending on the lighting. The ballroom was a starlit cavern, high ceilings, a glimmering dome, and a band swirling out a gentle foxtrot that no one was relaxed enough to dance to. I made my rounds slowly, collecting gossip, glances, and near-manic politeness. Everyone smiled too much. When rich people panic, they do it politely. The place smelled of anxiety wrapped in perfume. I spotted Lydia Vale first. No one could have missed her. She stood by the champagne tower in a silver gown that draped so elegantly it might have been poured on. She held her flute like a queen holding a scepter and looked like she could rule half of Europe if she could be bothered. When I approached, she lifted her chin. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, voice as smooth as aged cognac. "You're everywhere today." "Just here," I said, "and occasionally on Thursdays at the Shoe Shine." She allowed a smile. "You have a reputation for flippancy." "Only when terrified," I said, "and I terrify easily." Her smile expanded by 0.5 millimeter. "You're here because Raymond is dead." "That and the canapes," her gaze sharpened. "You're not amusing, Mr. Goodwin." "That's the first time anyone's accused me of that tonight," I said. "Would you like to talk in a quieter corner, or do you prefer addressing your trauma near the vol au vents?" The smile vanished. "Raymond was unfortunate. He meddled. My late husband warned him to avoid certain matters." "Such as?" She hesitated. "Henry kept a ledger, a private one, locked in the library. It's missing." "Missing," I repeated. "As in misplaced or stolen?" Her eyes flickered. "The latter, I fear." "Who knew about it?" "No one," she said too quickly. I tilted my head. "That's tidy, too tidy." She bristled, just slightly, then turned away, ending the conversation like extinguishing a candle. I made a note. Lydia Vale, elegant, evasive, and carrying a secret large enough to trip over if you weren't careful. My next target was Peter Glendon, the club's in-house accountant and walking advertisement for antacids. He sat alone near the draped windows, dabbing his forehead with a napkin and staring at the decor like it had personally insulted him. "Evening," I said, sliding into the chair opposite him. He flinched. "Mr. Goodwin, please, don't make a scene." "I never make scenes," I said. "Scenes make me." He swallowed. I don't want trouble." You joined the wrong club, friend. His hands twisted nervously. I know why you're here. Everyone's talking about Raymond, how he was found, and what it means. Enlighten me. His voice dropped to a whisper. The finances. They've been wrong for months. I've tried to fix the numbers, but they kept moving. Moving? Yes, shifting, changing without explanation. At first I thought I'd made mistakes, but then I noticed the adjustments always favoured. He stopped. Go on, I coaxed. Armitage, he whispered. Victor Armitage. His accounts were bleeding funds in ways no one was supposed to see. Raymond noticed. He told me he was going to expose it. And now he's dead. Glendon's eyes filled with sweat from pure terror. I told him not to. I told him to keep quiet. But he said he had protection, that he had something hidden. Hidden where? In the library, he said, but I don't know what, I swear it. I studied him. Glendon's type didn't murder secretaries in locked rooms. He couldn't even murder a stiff breeze, but he definitely knew something he shouldn't. I left him to hyperventilate in peace. Finally, I found Elsa Holdren, the widow. Grief had sharpened her. She looked like someone carved out of pure accusation. Her black gown glimmered like polished obsidian, and her eyes were hard, brittle stones. You're Archie Goodwin, she said when I approached. You were the last person to see my husband alive. Not exactly, I said gently. I saw him nervous, not dead. You upset him. He upset easily, I replied. Her jaw tightened. You didn't protect him. I didn't know he needed protection. She stepped closer. Russ killed him. You know that. Do I? Of course you do. Everyone knows. Henry discovered something about Rusk's political donors. He confronted him. She stabbed a finger toward the dance floor, where the congressman mingled like a man campaigning for sainthood. And that man silenced him. Mrs. Holdren, I said softly, accusing a sitting congressman of murder is a delicate hobby. Did Henry tell you any of this? No, she said with admirable honesty. So you're guessing. I am not guessing, she hissed. I am seeing. Rusk had motive, and he has power, and powerful men kill. She marched away before I could reply. Airtight alibi or not, Elsa's rage glowed like a warning beacon. She wanted justice, or revenge, and wasn't picky about the spelling. At 9:27, I stepped into a quieter lounge to phone Wolfe. The hum of conversation outside softened, and the smell of champagne faded into leather and old wood. Report, he commanded the moment he heard my voice. I gave it to him. Lydia and the missing ledger, Glendon's terror and financial anomalies, Elsa's accusations. Wolfe's sigh rumbled through the receiver. Your phrasing is imprecise. It's also correct. Imprecision irritates me. Everything irritates you, I said, except Fritz's cooking. Do not be impertinent, he growled, never intentionally. But here's the good part. 3 suspects, 3 motives, 3 sets of nerves twitching like violin strings. He grunted. Continue your surveillance. Yes, sir. And Archie, be explicit in your notes. No ambiguity. You say that like ambiguity is a vice. It is, Wolfe said, and you indulge it. Before I could retort, another voice spoke faintly in the background. Madeline Northbridge. Mr. Goodwin might have provoked danger tonight, she said, just loud enough for the phone to catch it. Wolfe snapped. Madam, cease. Mr. Goodwin's competence is not under discussion. I blinked. Well, well. Archie, Wolfe said sharply, finish your work. Yes, sir, I said, trying not to grin. Being defended by Wolfe was like spotting a unicorn strolling down Broadway. In my book, it was a hug, parade, and marching band. I hung up and stepped back toward the ballroom, just in time for my phone to buzz again. Saul Panzer. When Saul calls during a gala, you answer. Archie, Saul said in his quiet, steady voice. Update. Shoot. That ledger Lydia mentioned? What about it? It never existed. That stopped me cold. Explain. Rumour planted. I traced every mention. Lydia never spoke of it before today. No accountant logged it. No inventory list includes it. No one has ever seen it. So someone invented it to throw suspicion. Exactly, Saul said. Very clumsy too. Like they wanted everyone to chase a ghost. Or, I said, they wanted me to. Saul paused. Be careful. Someone's shepherding the narrative. I hung up, feeling the floor tilt. A fake ledger, a planted rumour. Someone was constructing false trails, crudely, as Wolfe would say. I stepped into the ballroom again, scanning the clusters of jittery socialites, the glittering gowns, the political smiles, the swirling panic masked by wealth. Behind the silk and smoke, someone was lying, and they were hoping I'd choke on it. Back at the brownstone later, Wolfe listened to my full report with an expression darker than midnight ink. When I reached the part about the non-existent ledger, he closed his eyes and murmured, "Someone is constructing false trails, crudely." And when Wolfe says crudely, someone is going to regret their life choices very soon. There's nothing quite like a midnight phone call from Inspector Kramer to let you know the evening has officially gone to hell. At 12:42 a.m., just as I was setting down a glass of ginger ale and contemplating the likelihood of sleep, the phone on my desk rang with a violence that suggested it held a personal grudge. "Goodwin," I answered. "Get your shoes on," Kramer growled. "Armitage is dead." Well, that was one way to start a conversation. 10 minutes later, I was riding a cab uptown through Manhattan's insomnia. The city glowed in streaks of neon and fog, and every streetlight seemed to blink in Morse code. Bad news. The penthouse towered over East 63rd like it owned the block. Armitage always did have expensive taste. When I reached the apartment, 2 uniformed cops were standing guard like bookends that had lost the book. Inside, the scene had the uneasy feel of a room that had put up a fight and lost. Furniture knocked askew, a lamp lying on its side, papers scattered like a confession tossed at the wind. Kramer stood in the middle of it all, looking as haggard as a man who'd been awake for 2 days straight on cigarettes and judicial pressure. His coat hung crookedly, and his eyes had the glassy glaze of someone contemplating murder, preferably of whoever had caused all this trouble. "Where is he?" I asked. "Study," Kramer said. "Follow me, and don't touch anything unless you want me to burst a blood vessel." The study looked like a lawyer's showroom, mahogany desk, glass decanters, leather chairs arranged for intimidation or seduction depending on need. Victor Armitage lay face down near the desk, one arm flung forward as if reaching for help that never arrived. Thick rug, dark stain. You get the picture. Unlike Wolfe's wound or Holdren's quick end, Armitage had fought back. His face, visible when the medical examiner shifted him, bore scratches, long welts across his cheek and jawline. Someone had clawed at him or been clawed by him. "Same blade?" I asked. Kramer nodded. "Looks like it. Same size, same depth. Killer wiped the handle again, but my guys will check the rub marks." I crouched near the desk, not touching, just observing. The scratch pattern was diagonal, left to right. "Right-handed attacker," I murmured. Kramer grunted. "Probably. Anything else your eagle eyes want to volunteer?" "As a matter of fact," I said calmly, reaching toward the baseboard. I plucked a glint of metal lodged between the rug's fringe and the wall. "You should see this." "Don't touch it," he snapped. "I'm using the handkerchief," I reminded him, lifting it with the cloth. A gold cufflink, smooth, elegant, engraved with 2 bold letters, R.R. Kramer stared at it. "Damn." "Yep." "Damn," he repeated. "Very literate tonight," I said. He glared. "I don't like needing your man, Goodwin." "Believe me, we don't like being needed," I replied. "But here we are." Kramer exhaled, loud and exhausted. "This points to Rusk." I shook my head. "It points to a cufflink. Rusk may be dumb enough to lie about campaign funding, but I doubt he'd leave his monogram behind at a murder scene." Kramer's lip twitched. "Unless he planted it." "Maybe," I said. "But planting evidence this obvious is almost worse. It screams setup." He rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Wolfe needs to see the details. But if you take genuine evidence out of this apartment—" "Relax," I said. "I'll show him a photographic description, and the cufflink stays with you. I'm not collecting souvenirs." Satisfied, for the moment, Kramer bagged the evidence. By 1:51 a.m., after finishing my rounds with the forensics crew, I stepped into the hallway to phone Wolfe. He answered after 3 rings, sounding like a man who had been yanked rudely from contemplating the orchid's well-being. "What now, Archie?" he asked, which in Wolfe's language meant he was worried and hiding it badly. "Armitage's penthouse," I said. "He's been stabbed." Silence. Then, "Describe it." I did. The wound, The scene, the scratches, the cufflink, the possibility of a setup. When I finished, Wolfe exhaled slowly. "It is too obvious," he murmured. "Rusk's insignia, in plain sight. Too obvious." "You think it's a plant?" "Archie," Wolfe said sharply, "criminals rarely embrace simplicity unless they are idiots, and this killer is not an idiot." "I don't know," I said. "The crime scenes so far aren't exactly Rembrandt compositions." "They are rushed," Wolfe corrected. "Not sloppy. There is a difference." I leaned against the wall. "Kramer wants justification to drag Rusk in for questioning." "Of course he does," Wolfe growled. "He must show progress, but he will not arrest Rusk without more." "Rusk is already prepping a press statement," I said. I heard one of his aides whispering in the hallway. "The congressman's planning to paint the whole thing as political sabotage." Wolfe's hum was steeped in disapproval. Public opinion is a blunt instrument, and fools wield it readily. Right on cue, another call beeped in. I excused myself, switched lines. "Archie?" Lon Cohen's voice buzzed with newsroom energy. "Bad time?" "Only if this is about baseball." "I wish. The evening editions are rolling," Lon said. "You and Wolfe are about to get roasted. Papers are running the angle that Wolfe is covering for the murderer. One columnist is flat out accusing him of interfering with the investigation." "Wonderful," I muttered. "Wolfe will love that." "Tell him to brace himself," Lon added. "More coming." I hung up and returned to Wolfe. "That was Cohen," I said. "The press is turning on you." Wolfe's lips compressed so thin you could have shaved ice with them. "Archie," he said, voice as cold as a winter blade, "return immediately." When Wolfe uses immediately, it means he wants you there before you hang up. By 2:32 a.m., I was back in the brownstone. Wolfe sat in his chair, broad and immovable as a granite monument, one hand near his bandaged side, though he'd never admit the pain was real. A stack of newspapers lay on the coffee table, freshly delivered by Fritz, who looked offended at the ink smudges. Wolfe pointed at the top headline with a look that could scorch wood. "Detective Wolfe impedes inquiry, protecting elite club." "I am surrounded," Wolfe announced, "by imbeciles." "I call it job security," I said. "Your levity," he growled, "is grotesque." "Maybe," I replied, "but it's all that's keeping us from despair." He glared at me but didn't argue. Fritz appeared in the doorway with a tray. He never brings food after 11 p.m. unless someone has died or Wolfe has decided to skip sleep. Tonight, clearly qualified. He set a small plate at Wolfe's elbow, cold chicken, bread, a careful arrangement of sliced tomatoes, and a separate plate for me. Wolfe frowned. "I did not request." "I requested," Fritz said with rare firmness, then left us. Wolfe glanced at me. "Explain." "You've been stabbed," I said. "You're upset. You need food." "Pfui," he said, but he ate it anyway. As he worked through the chicken with short, irritated bites, I told him everything Kramer said, down to the tone of each grunt. When I mentioned Rusk's cufflink again, Wolfe shut his eyes briefly. "He is being framed," Wolfe said. "Or he dropped it fighting with Armitage," I countered. "Archie." Wolfe opened his eyes. If Rusk intended murder, he would not neglect such a detail. "So, you're defending him?" "I am defending logic," Wolfe snapped. I leaned back. "Either way, Armitage's death changes the board." Wolfe exhaled. "Yes, it clarifies the killer's desperation. Or ambition." "Archie," he said irritably, "must you insist on interpreting everything through melodrama? It keeps my life interesting. You mistake turmoil for vitality. And you mistake comfort for wisdom," I shot back. He glared, but the glare softened, fractionally. Wolfe rarely let his concern show, but there it was in the twitch at the corner of his mouth, the way he kept scanning me for signs of injury I didn't have. I stretched. "You want me to type up the Armitage notes now?" "No," he said. "You will not type. You will go retrieve someone." "Saul? Ori? Fred? Pfui." His eyes went dark and decisive. "Bring me Congressman Rusk tonight." I blinked. "You want Rusk here at 3 a.m.? "Yes." "Wolfe, this is Manhattan, not Dracula's castle." He levelled a stare at me. "Archie, bring me Rusk." And that was that. When Nero Wolfe orders something at 3 a.m, the city might sleep, but Archie Goodwin doesn't. Politicians are like alley cats. They always find a way to slip out of traps unless you bait them with ego. At 7:42 p.m., after a creative phone call that promised Congressman Harland Rusk the opportunity to clarify his position in a delicate police matter, I expected him to show up wrapped in patriotic indignation. Instead, when the doorbell rang at 8:05, Fritz opened the door to reveal a man who looked like he'd forgotten half his talking points and all his confidence. Rusk stepped inside the brownstone with the uneasy energy of a man entering a confessional he hadn't scheduled. His overcoat was impeccable, his hair combed into neat political waves, but the illusion cracked at the neck. There, barely concealed under his starched collar, sat a fresh bandage, white, taut, betraying what he'd tried to hide. "Good evening, Congressman," I said pleasantly. "You look like you've been campaigning with barbed wire." He flinched. "I don't have time for jokes, Goodwin." "You came to the wrong house, then," I replied, guiding him toward the office. "We run on jokes and precision around here. Wolfe handles the precision." I opened the office door. Wolfe was at his desk, looking as vast and immovable as a mountain of offended intellect. A chilled glass of beer sat at his elbow. After all, it was well past noon, and the bandage on his side, though hidden under his vest, was silently taking attendance. "Congressman Rusk," Wolfe said without rising. "Sit." Rusk sat. He didn't argue. That was new. He cleared his throat. "Mr. Wolfe, I came because Goodwin implied I could clear misunderstandings." Wolfe lifted a finger. "First, cease that tone. You are not speaking to a constituent. Second, speak plainly." Rusk bristled, then wilted. "Fine. I'm being framed." I leaned against my desk. "By whom?" "If I knew that," Rusk snapped, "I would not be here." Wolfe's eyelids drooped. "Your cufflink." Rusk inhaled sharply. "I lost it. Days ago. Look, I didn't kill Armitage." "That remains to be seen," Wolfe said. "Explain your injury." Rusk's hand reflexively went to his collar, then dropped. "I took a fall." "On what?" I asked. "A staircase." "Ah," I said, "one of those violent, aggressive staircases that leap at congressmen." Rusk glared. "Goodwin, if you're incapable of seriousness," Wolfe cut in sharply. Archie's levity does not diminish his faculty for discernment. "You will answer him without bluster." I tried not to grin. When Wolfe publicly defends me, it's like spotting a comet, rare, bright, and worth marking on your calendar. Rusk sighed. "Last night, after I got home from the club, I slipped. I tripped on a rug. I hit the banister hard." "Do you often trip on rugs?" I asked. "No," he said through clenched teeth. "But I was agitated." "Because you argued with Armitage," I said. Rusk stiffened. "Who told you that?" "Everyone who watched him sweat through 2 suits this week." Rusk sank back in the chair. "All right. Yes, I argued with him. About money, campaign funds. He was supposed to route a donation through a foundation. Instead, he pocketed it. I confronted him. He denied everything." "And threatened you," I added. Rusk's eyes flicked toward me. "He had leverage. He kept notes on everyone. Everyone. Do you understand? Holdren kept files too." Wolfe stirred slightly. "Files?" "Yes," Rusk insisted. "A secret set. Personal details, scandals, things that could ruin careers. That man collected dirt like a hobby." I exchanged a glance with Wolfe. "That would explain why someone wanted Holdren dead," I said, "and why someone broke into the library." Rusk nodded vigorously. "Exactly. Someone wanted those files hidden." Wolfe's expression remained unreadable. "And you expect us to believe that the murderer, being so meticulous as to plant your cufflink, simply struck you in a scuffle and left no other trace?" Rusk blinked rapidly. "I told you, I wasn't in a fight." "Your neck," Wolfe said, "shows abrasion, blunt trauma. Not fingernail scratches, not defensive gouging. The shape is consistent with a rounded wooden edge. A fall." Rusk blinked again. "How do you know?" Wolfe allowed himself a moment of smugness. "I have been injured before, Congressman. I know the differences." His eyes flicked to me. I raised an eyebrow. Wolfe had admitted vulnerability, subtly, carefully, but honestly enough to make Rusk swallow hard. Rusk sagged in his chair. "I swear I didn't kill Armitage." I folded my arms. "Do you know who did?" "No," he said. "But I can tell you this. Holdren's file on Armitage wasn't his only one. There are others, and someone has been trying desperately to find them. That, Wolfe murmured, is leverage. Rusk nodded. Yes, political, financial, reputational, everything. Holdren kept them in that library room. Convenient, I said, for both blackmail and murder. Rusk shot me a pained glare. You think I'm capable of stabbing Armitage, or Holdren, or Wolfe? I think, I said, that you're capable of exactly what's necessary to protect your hide. And before Rusk could reply, the phone rang. I answered. Goodwin. Kramer's voice came through thick with irritation. Put Wolfe on. One moment, I said. He's in a cooperative mood. I handed the receiver to Wolfe. Kramer didn't wait for greetings. Wolfe, he said, your boy was right. The ME says Rusk's neck wound is from a fall, not a fight. Don't let it go to your head. The corner of Wolfe's mouth curled, barely, but it counted. Inspector, your willingness to acknowledge reality is commendable. Yeah, Kramer muttered. But listen, the DA's crawling up my back. Rusk's lawyer is threatening subpoenas. If you pull anything— I have pulled nothing, Wolfe said coolly. Congressman Rusk's involvement is questionable, not confirmed. Good, Kramer gruffed. Because if he's innocent, we're dealing with a killer who wants him to look guilty, which means he'll strike again. You understand that? Wolfe's eyes flicked to me, fast, sharp, calculating. I understand. Fine, Kramer said. Keep me updated. He hung up without ceremony. I took the phone from Wolfe and set it down. You're making friends tonight. Phooey, Wolfe muttered. Rusk cleared his throat. So, what now? Wolfe leaned forward, his voice taking on the low, heavy timbre that means judgment is imminent. Congressman, someone is manipulating events, sowing evidence, creating false narratives, and using your reputation as tinder. I knew it, Rusk whispered. I knew someone was trying to ruin me. Do not presume, Wolfe snapped. Your ruin may be incidental, or beneficial, or irrelevant. Rusk winced. I don't deserve this. Wolfe stared down at him like an annoyed deity. Deserving has nothing to do with it. You are entangled, that is all. I stepped forward. You're going home, Congressman. Quietly. Don't talk to the press, don't talk to your staff, don't talk to anyone unless Wolfe tells you. Is he protecting me? Rusk asked faintly. I smirked. He's protecting the case. If you benefit, count your blessings. Rusk rose shakily, nodded once to Wolfe, then to me, and walked out with the posture of a man who had lost a kingdom, but still hoped for a duchy. Fritz appeared in the doorway, watching him leave. Shall I bring dinner? He asked. It is not 8 yet, Wolfe said, but yes. Fritz vanished as silently as he came. The office grew still. Wolfe stared into the middle distance, thinking in geometric patterns only he could see. I broke the silence. So, Rusk's innocent? Innocent? Wolfe scoffed softly. No, not of foolishness, arrogance, or avarice, but he is not a murderer. Then who is? Wolfe closed his eyes for 2 beats, then opened them with a spark that stiffened my spine. Archie, he said quietly, the killer will strike again. Prepare. When Wolfe says prepare, he doesn't mean polish my shoes. He means brace for impact. Some houses hum when the night settles. Ours didn't hum. It held its breath. By the time the clock struck 9:03 p.m., the brownstone was so quiet you could have heard a guilty conscience tiptoe across the parquet. Wolfe sat solidly behind his desk, the mountain in its rightful place, while I was stationed in the front hall chair like the world's most sarcastic sentry. If the killer intended to strike again, we were ready. At least, Wolfe said we were ready. Personally, I would have preferred a bazooka. Outside, Manhattan coughed and muttered in its usual nighttime tones, but inside, Fritz walked softly, Theodore tended orchids in exile upstairs, and Wolfe refused to let even the draft under the door misbehave. The brownstone had gone from sanctuary to fortress. At 9:27 the phone rang. I snatched it up. Goodwin. Saul Pantzer's voice came low, urgent. Archie, we've got movement. Where? Haldren's apartment. Someone broke in 5 minutes ago. I straightened so fast I nearly spilled a perfectly good ginger ale. Describe. No description, Saul said. They were fast. Small build, masked, dark clothes. I tailed them up the fire escape, but they jumped the next building's rooftop gap. I couldn't follow without breaking something essential. You let them get away? Not empty-handed, Saul replied, They dropped a folder, photostats. The word hit like ice water. What kind of photostats? Blackmail files, Archie, Saul said. Holdren kept copies, victim dossiers, payments received, dates, leverage details. My eyebrows shot up far enough to qualify for aviation clearance. Who's on the list? Too many. Lydia Vale, Glendon, several donors, a judge, 3 businessmen. And? Saul hesitated. Spit it out, I said. Fingerprints on the folder. Whose? Madeline Northbridge. I went cold. You sure? Yes. Bring them, I said, and hung up. I re-entered the office. Wolfe didn't look up, but his eyes flicked toward me like searchlights. Well, he said. A gift from Saul, I said, handing over the envelope. Wolfe opened it with the delicacy of a man unwrapping an explosive. He skimmed the first photostat, typed notes, payment dates, leverage claims. Holdren was industrious, Wolfe murmured. Ambitious too, I said. He blackmailed half the club. Wolfe turned the next sheet. The light from his desk lamp caught the typed name, Madeline Northbridge. Beneath it, payment entries, a note referencing her late husband's financial missteps, and finally, fingerprint notations from forensics. Wolfe's expression didn't change, but something behind it tightened. His silence went from routine to lethal. She was in his files, I said. She touched them. Recently. Wolfe set the sheet down carefully. I warned her. Before I could respond, the front bell rang at 9:46, with the indignation only wealthy panic produces. I checked the peephole. Madeline Northbridge stood outside. Coat immaculate, posture flawless, expression brittle enough to fracture under a strong breeze. I opened the door. Mrs. Northbridge, evening stroll? She swept past me like royalty entering a courtroom. I want answers. Mr. Wolfe has gone silent. That is unacceptable. Funny thing, I said. That's exactly what people say before they get them. She ignored me and marched into the office. Wolfe didn't rise. He rarely does. But he lifted his head with the slow disdain of a king acknowledging a subject. Madam, he said, your timing is regrettable. I don't care, she replied, planting herself before his desk. The situation is spiraling. I demand an update. You demand, Wolfe repeated flatly. Yes, she said. I paid you, Wolfe snapped. No, you offered payment. I accepted under conditions. You violated one. She blinked. What? I handed her the photostat. Her face blanched. The transformation was surgical, one clean slice from composure to panic. I can explain, she stammered. I would appreciate it, Wolfe said. Now. Madeline swallowed. That file, Henry's name, it's wrong. Incorrect, Wolfe said, but continue. She tightened her grip. Holdren kept those files as insurance. Everyone knew he meddled. After Henry died, I found out he'd been supporting a foundation that wasn't entirely legitimate. If that came out, his legacy, our name, would be destroyed. I tilted my head. So, you wanted the blackmail file gone? Yes, she snapped, but not the man. I never hurt Haldren. I only wanted the file destroyed. Wolfe's voice went icier. You touched the file. Yes, she whispered. I found it weeks ago and burned part of it. But he kept copies. I didn't know that. I folded my arms. That's a problem. Big one. Madeline looked at me with raw desperation. I didn't kill anyone. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. You infiltrated Haldren's privacy. You destroyed evidence, and you withheld this from me. I was ashamed, she said, voice cracking. It was my husband's disgrace. I thought I could manage it alone. You thought, Wolfe said, incorrectly. Tears threatened her mascara, but she fought them off. Mr. Wolfe, please. Wolfe inhaled deeply. Madam, you have misled me. That is intolerable. If you do so again, I will withdraw. It was a sentence delivered like a guillotine. Madeline closed her eyes. When she opened them, something in her posture had wilted. Understood, she said quietly. Before anyone could speak further, a second bell rang. Hard, impatient. Madeline flinched. Who is that? I checked the peephole again. Inspector Kramer, I said. With attitude. Let him in, Wolfe ordered. I opened the door. Kramer stepped inside, trench coat soaked from mist, a cigar clamped between his teeth like a plug holding back frustration. "Goodwin," he barked. "Where is she?" "Who?" I asked innocently. Kramer jerked his chin toward the office. "I got an anonymous call saying Madeline Northbridge is here withholding evidence, so don't get cute." "And here I thought I hid it well," I said. Kramer stomped past me. "Wolfe?" "Inspector," Wolfe said evenly. Kramer looked at Madeline, then at the photostat on Wolfe's desk. "So it's true." Madeline drew herself up. "I have done nothing wrong." "You're in a murder investigation up to your jewelry," Kramer growled, "and anonymous calls make me nervous." Wolfe interjected sharply. "Inspector, you will moderate your tone. Mrs. Northbridge is not a suspect." Kramer bristled. "She lied to you." Wolfe tapped the photostat. "She also presented us with material of investigative value." I stepped forward before Kramer could explode. "Here," I said, handing him the folder. "Saul recovered it from Holdren's apartment 5 minutes after our mystery intruder fled." Kramer stared at the file. "And you're giving it to me?" "Yes," I said, "unless you prefer to execute search warrants on Tuesdays." Kramer grunted, surprised. "You're a pain, Goodwin, but you're square." "I'll take that as a valentine." Kramer ignored me and flipped through the pages. His jaw tightened. "This is a mess, and it means someone's desperate." "Yes," Wolfe agreed, "and desperation hastens mistakes." Kramer eyed Wolfe warily. "You look like you know something." Wolfe closed his eyes for a moment, then reopened them. "Inspector, the killer's identity is clear, but the proof is not." Kramer's voice went lower. "Then we'd better find it before someone else dies." "Indeed," Wolfe said. Kramer tucked the photostat under his arm and headed toward the door. "I'll be in touch." When he was gone, Madeline sank into the nearest chair. "Mr. Wolfe, what happens now?" Wolfe didn't answer her. He looked at me. His voice was low, final. "The final blow will come soon. I know the killer's identity, but not yet the proof." The brownstone exhaled like a beast waking from hibernation, and I felt the air change. If Nero Wolfe ever decided to overthrow a government, he'd do it from his orchid rooms, with a glass of beer, a Latin proverb, and a scowl potent enough to topple empires. At 6:02 p.m., when orchid hours ended and the brownstone exhaled its daily sigh of botanical relief, Wolfe emerged from his greenhouse throne ready to stage what I suspected would be his own miniature congressional hearing, and naturally, I was the clerk, sergeant-at-arms, and chief trouble magnet. The office had been rearranged according to Wolfe's specifications, meaning I did all the work while he sat in the plant rooms contemplating the meaning of treachery. I lined up chairs in crescent formation, Lydia Vale in the seat that looked expensive enough for her ego, Glendon in the one least likely to allow escape, Madeline in the centre where Wolfe's gaze would roast her evenly on all sides, and Rusk opposite her because politicians prefer space for grand gestures. At 6:10, Fritz entered carrying a wooden tray bearing a chilled glass of beer for Wolfe and a ginger ale for me. Fritz shot a look at the chairs, nodded at the symmetry, and glided away without a word. Fritz approved of order. Tonight was a cathedral of it. The suspects filtered in by twos and ones, trailed by nerves clinging to their coats like static. Lydia Vale entered first, her silver dress crisp enough to cut glass. She sniffed the air as if expecting Wolfe to serve her subpoenas on a silver platter. Next came Peter Glendon, trembling with the subtle grace of a harpsichord in an earthquake. Behind him was Madeline Northbridge, her poise cracked from the pressure of last night's accusations. And finally, Congressman Rusk, who behaved like a man who'd practiced indignation in a mirror and found it fit him better than honesty. Wolfe entered last. The room straightened as if gravity itself saluted him. He sat, lifted the glass of beer, and took a single ceremonious sip. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "thank you for indulging me. We have matters to settle." I leaned against my desk, notebook ready, pen poised. Wolfe folded his hands. "First, a correction to certain assumptions. The so-called blackmail file recovered from Holdren's apartment is spurious." Madeline inhaled sharply. Lydia stiffened. Glendon twitched. Wolfe went on. "Holdren fabricated that file to mislead whomever sought leverage among you. It was bait. The true secret lay elsewhere." He shifted his gaze toward me. "Archie, enumerate." I cleared my throat. During my first visit to the Northbridge Club library, I noticed the door wasn't just broken, it was forced inward, and the inside panel had been disturbed. At the time, I thought it was bad carpentry, but someone was trying to reach inside the wall. Wolfe nodded. Behind that panel was a sealed envelope. Its contents were delicate. Madeline flinched. You found it? Yes, Wolfe said. A confession written by your late husband. She swallowed audibly. It detailed, Wolfe continued, the embezzlement conducted by Mr. Peter Glendon. Glendon let out a squeak reminiscent of a punctured balloon. No, this is absurd. Wolfe raised a finger. Your reaction buries you further, sir. Henry Northbridge discovered your theft. He penned a confession to protect his wife from suspicion and intended to confront you. However, he died before he could do so. Glendon crumpled. I didn't kill him. No, Wolfe said, you did not. His death was natural, but his confession remained potent. Madeline shut her eyes. Henry tried to fix everything. Rusk leaned forward. So Armitage tried to use the confession to blackmail Glendon. Correct, Wolfe said. Armitage found the envelope first, likely during one of his clandestine financial rummages. He intended to extort Mr. Glendon. Glendon whimpered. He threatened me. He said he'd expose me unless I paid him. And Holdren? Lydia asked softly, voice ice-edged. Holdren, Wolfe said, discovered Armitage's intent. He tried to steal the confession for himself. That was the night Archie noticed the panel damage. It was not renovation, it was larceny. I added, and that same night, someone searched Wolfe's office thinking he had the confession. Wolfe's lips thinned. Indeed, the intruder stabbed me, or attempted to, under the belief that the confession had been moved to my safe. Lydia's eyes narrowed. And who was that? Wolfe ignored her. All of this culminated in 3 attempted or successful murders, but the connective tissue is the confession. It threatened one individual's future so profoundly that they resorted to violence. Glendon's face drained. I swear, Wolfe cut him off. Mr. Glendon, your guilt in embezzlement is established. Your guilt in murder is not yet proven. The room vibrated with tension. Rusk cleared his throat. So what now, Wolfe? You summoned us to lecture us. No, Wolfe said. I summoned you to warn you. Madeline's voice broke. Warn us of what? Wolfe looked at each of them slowly, deliberately, like assigning guilt with his eyes alone. The killer will panic soon, he said, and panic breeds recklessness. Lydia bristled. You imply one of us. Wolfe lifted a hand. Madam, allow me to finish. He inhaled deeply. I know the killer's identity, but I lack a final piece, the proof. That missing element will return to this brownstone within the hour. Every head turned toward me, as if I were hiding a murder weapon in my jacket. I shrugged. Don't look at me. I'm just the usher. Glendon sputtered. Wolfe, you can't do this. You can't just leave us dangling. On the contrary, Wolfe said, dangling is precisely what you deserve. Lydia rose halfway out of her seat. You can't hold us hostage. I am holding nothing, Wolfe said evenly. You are free to leave at any time. None of them moved. Wolfe's voice dropped, rich and dangerous. I invited you because truth is like an orchid. It blooms only under exact conditions. I have cultivated those conditions here. And what conditions are those? Rusk demanded. The condition, Wolfe said, that the killer knows I have nearly solved the matter, and will attempt something foolish to prevent revelation. The silence that followed was thick enough to butter toast with. Finally Madeline spoke, her voice trembling. Mr. Wolfe, you truly know? Yes, he said softly. Rusk jabbed a finger. If you know, then say it. Wolfe didn't blink. I said I know the identity, not the proof. Yet. Lydia scoffed. You enjoy this. Wolfe's stare froze her. Madam, enjoy is an inexact word. I prefer resolve. The air tightened. Chairs groaned faintly as suspects shifted. Sweat beaded on Glendon's temples. Lydia's polished facade cracked a hairline. Rusk clenched and unclenched his jaw like a boxer shadow playing with his conscience. Madeline trembled. I made a note in my pad. Room tension, equivalent to holding a violin bow against a live wire. Wolfe finished his beer. That alone made everyone jump. The soft clink of the glass on the desk sounded like a gun cocking. At 7, Wolfe announced, I will reconvene this assembly. At that time, with the final element in hand, I will name the murderer." Glendon's voice cracked. "You can't." "I can," Wolfe said. Rusk pushed his chair back. "This is madness." "No," Wolfe said. "It is method." Madeline whispered, "What if the killer strikes before then?" Wolfe's eyes landed on me. "Archie." I nodded. "I'll be here." He stared at the suspects. "You may go. Until 7. They hesitated, then filed out, one by one, leaving trails of fear behind them like perfume. When the door shut on the last quivering ego, Wolfe beckoned me closer. "Archie," he said quietly, "be ready." For Wolfe, that wasn't advice. It was prophecy. There are days when the brownstone feels like a respectable home, and then there are days when it feels like the center ring of a particularly ambitious circus. At 6:58 p.m., as the last rays of daylight slid off West 35th Street like a weary stagehand, the house had the latter identity. Wolfe was in his chair, larger than the chair deserved, one hand resting lightly on his vest near the healing wound, as if daring it to complain. He looked like an injured monarch in exile, calm, furious, and absolutely immovable. By 7:01, the suspects began arriving for Wolfe's promised revelation. Lydia Vale swept in first, the silver gown replaced by a navy ensemble sharp enough to file taxes with. She sat like a woman auditioning for the role of goddess of poise. Next came Congressman Rusk, his collar still hiding evidence of his recent tango with gravity, followed by Madeline Northbridge, whose face wore the delicate strain of someone who'd spent the night bargaining with ghosts. And finally Peter Glendon, who looked like he'd stepped out of a washing machine during the spin cycle, damp, wilted, and trembling. Kramer showed up precisely at 7:05, trenchcoat dusted with cold air, cigar clamped between his teeth like it was holding his sanity together. Tonight, he wasn't storming. He looked like a man prepared to listen, or at least to not shout until he had something worth shouting about. "Wolfe," he said, nodding with a weariness that had become its own form of civility. "Inspector," Wolfe replied. "Sit." Kramer sat, and the room settled. Fritz appeared at the door, gave me a ginger ale and duty glance, and disappeared to time dinner like the world depended on it. Maybe it did. Wolfe lifted a hand, and the office went silent with the obedience of a courtroom waiting for sentence. "You are all here," Wolfe said, "because tonight ends the matter." Glendon swallowed audibly. "First," Wolfe continued, "the confession hidden in the wall confirmed that Henry Northbridge uncovered embezzlement. Mr. Glendon stole funds from the Northbridge Club's accounts." Glendon let out a small strangled sound. Rusk shot him a look that could have melted upholstery. "But the confession," Wolfe said, "is not the proof of murder. I required something else." He turned his gaze to me. "Archie." I stepped forward. Last night, while Fritz was cleaning the office, under strict instructions not to touch anything important which he ignored, he found a button under the radiator, a coat button, black, polished, custom-made. Glendon's face went dead white. Wolfe's voice lowered into something that made even my spine behave. "That button was torn from the killer's coat when he attacked me." Lydia gasped softly. Madeline's hand went to her throat. Rusk muttered, "I knew it." Glendon stammered, What? What button? My coat." "Your coat," Wolfe said, "is missing a button." I slid the evidence envelope onto Wolfe's desk, already opened. Inside sat the button, dark, glossy, unmistakably exclusive. "In the last hour, I paid Mr. Glendon a friendly visit. I noticed his coat was missing its top button. Same size, same style, same maker. The tailor confirmed only 12 coats in Manhattan use that exact model. All club members, but only one coat is missing this button." Glendon threw up his hands. "This is insane! Someone planted it! Someone must have broken into my apartment." "No one broke into your apartment," I said. "Your superintendent confirmed you've been home all day, shaking like a guilty tambourine." Kramer grunted something like agreement. Wolfe folded his hands. "Mr. Glendon, when you stabbed me in my office, you believed I had obtained the confession from the wall. You were mistaken. You attacked in haste in darkness, and you left behind something foolishly identifying." Glendon's breath came in gasps. "Wolfe, I never meant to stab you. I didn't even know you. I thought you weren't supposed to be there." The words spilled out, uncontrolled. Kramer sat forward. "Mr. Glendon, are you confessing?" Glendon swayed in the chair. I didn't kill Henry, I swear. But Haldren, he found out about the embezzlement. He said he'd ruin me. I panicked, but I didn't mean to kill him. I only meant to get the confession." Madeline let out a small cry, covering her mouth. Glendon wiped his face. Then Armitage came. He wanted money. He said he'd expose me. I argued with him. He lunged. He hit me first, and then he buried his face in his hands. I didn't mean to kill him either. But he wouldn't stop. He said he'd drag me to the press, ruin me, maybe prison. Rusk jerked back. "So you killed them both," Glendon wailed. "It was self-defense." "No," Wolfe said calmly. "It was convenience." Glendon's sobbing broke into silence. "And when you feared," Wolfe continued, "that I had obtained Henry Northbridge's confession, you came to the brownstone. You attempted to murder me, and failed." Kramer rose. "That's enough." Glendon collapsed back in his chair, defeated. Kramer approached him, producing handcuffs with the weary professionalism of a surgeon preparing an unwanted procedure. "Peter Glendon, you are under arrest for murder." As he clicked the cuffs, Kramer added, almost gratefully, "Wolfe, you saved us a month of digging." Wolfe inclined his head. "Inspector." Respect, exchanged without theatrics. Kramer signaled to two uniforms waiting at the front hall. They escorted Glendon out, his sobs echoing up the staircase and through the brownstone like the last notes of a broken violin. Madeline pressed a hand to her forehead. Lydia stood stiff as sculpture. Rusk looked simultaneously vindicated and nauseated. Wolfe gestured toward the door. "You are all dismissed." Lydia left first, icy and upright. Rusk followed, adjusting his collar with shaking hands. Madeline lingered a moment, eyes glistening with a gratitude tempered by grief, then vanished into the hall. The door shut. Silence returned. Wolfe closed his eyes, letting tension drain from his massive shoulders. I exhaled a breath I'd been holding since Monday. "Well," I said, "you know, if you ever wanted excitement, you could have just asked." Wolfe opened one eye. "Archie," he said, "if I ever want excitement, I shall take poison." "You're welcome," I replied. He glowered at me, which in Wolfe speak meant he was relieved, maybe even grateful, though he'd rather stab himself again than admit it. Right on cue, Fritz appeared in the doorway with a perfectly timed tray. Roast duck, glazed carrots, a sauce that smelled worthy of pilgrimages. Dinner at 8 p.m., as immutable as gravity. Wolfe sat up, slowly, carefully, painfully, and allowed Fritz to present the meal with reverence usually reserved for sacraments. Fritz left. The house warmed again. Wolfe lifted his fork. "Archie, bolt the door. I've had enough visitors stabbing me for 1 week." I went to the door, slid the bolt home, and glanced back at him, injured, irritable, and entirely himself. Thus concluded the day Wolfe got stabbed. The bruise lasted a week. Wolfe's irritation lasted a month.